All right, friends, we are back with Up to Speed in our race for the commissioner's seat. We are on interview 7 of 7, and it has been such a fantastic process. Daniel, how are you? I know you're doing fabulous, I hope.
I'm fabulous today. Happy Friday, to everybody.
It is a Friday indeed, and it's right before the primary election, so this couldn't be more timely. Today, we are joined with California State Senator Mr. Ben Allen. How are you?
I'm great. Good to see you guys.
We are so excited to chat with you and really just round out this conversation. As mentioned, we have interviewed the top 7 candidates over the last 6, 8 weeks or so and really had a great time finding out everybody's big levers, what they're looking for as far as changing this marketplace or this crazy turbulent land we have here in California. I always like to really start our conversation off with the fact that California really compresses everything. It's the risk, the regulation, the reality. It's a faster, harder, and less forgiving marketplace. And that's exactly why this race matters so much. And a lot of people don't know what the commissioner does, but it's a very important seat. So with that, I would like to say hello and also really just get to know you from why are you doing this? You've spent a lot of time in politics, but now why this seat?
So I've a lot of my focus has been on wildfire resilience and was the lead author of the bond, Prop 4 that we passed just last go around, which is now pushing out significant new resources to help reduce our risk around the state. It's been a big focus of mine for quite some time. I've done a lot of ethics and transparency, political reform work. I've done a lot of work on consumer protections, on environmental protections. And then, of course, I represent a big portion of the fire zone from Los Angeles last year. And it was a really tough experience going through that and trying to help my district, help my constituents and my community go through that. In fact, arguably, if I'm elected this position, I'll be the first insurance commissioner in history who's had a major natural disaster in his home community. So really tough experience. Gave me a front row seat to all the dysfunction of the system. I got to see how much, I continue to see how much the underinsurance that exists in our system, in our society, actually helping to harm the recovery and the ability of the community to get back on its feet. I ended up throwing myself into all sorts of different avenues of insurance policy. So over time, I've been very aware of this position, the power of this position, the importance of this position. It's the most important position that no one's ever heard of, except for the people who listen to this podcast. But it's immensely important. And I think insurance is such an essential component to a successful economy. And yet we all know, and I know you've discussed this in the past, the system is at risk, it's complex. There's going to be a very complicated set of market and political solutions that are going to have to come together to help to heal the system. And as I've reflected on my time in the legislature, what's given me the greatest sense of professional satisfaction is working on really tough, multifactorial, multi-sectoral negotiations. I was the Senate lead on the TV and film tax credit. I mentioned the bond, wildfire resilience bond, big plastics waste reduction, extended producer responsibility legislation. I was the lead author of the Voters' Choice Act, which now has created this whole system where we can all vote in person using drop boxes, by mail, any day up until election day, anywhere in your county. So I've engaged in very tough, difficult negotiations over the years on many different topics, including in insurance. And this is going to take somebody who's sophisticated, who cares about making the system work for working people, but who also has a deep knowledge of the way that Sacramento works and deep relationships. And I think one of the many things I bring to this race is a personal relationship with all the top candidates for governor, endorsement of all the legislative leadership and the vast majority of my colleagues in the legislature, a deep understanding and track record of getting difficult work done in Sacramento. If you think about what we're going to need to do to help to heal the market and heal the system, it's going to involve complicated and difficult legislation. A lot of legislators run away from this subject matter because it's so hard. A lot of people want to run a bill and declare victory and go on to the next topic and never return. And I think that's one of the reasons why some of the pathologies continue. And I'm excited about the prospect of getting my hands dirty, involved in this, trying to come up with solutions. And at the end of the day, I was just literally, my last call before this was with a big Napa Firewise Council. And if we can help to shift culture and patterns and rules in a way around our state using this insurance related crisis to pursue policies that are going to reduce risk in our higher risk areas, and make it so that we're much less likely to have the human calamity that we experienced last year in Los Angeles and that the folks up north experienced a couple of years ago. That would certainly be something I would consider a major achievement.
I love it. And I really have enjoyed having these non-political conversations just about the big levers and the points of interest for each candidate, because I think it really does really shaped the race and the importance of this seat. You've got a lot of different focuses on your website, and one of them is the marketplace. And Daniel and I could speak to this marketplace because just today, or I've had 3 different phone calls from clients that are non-renewed or not getting great options. And if you think about the top 12 markets in California, 7 of them are just like not writing here, or they've reduced their capacity completely since 2022. When we're looking at the market now, it's a lot of these non-admitted carriers that are coming and saving the day. And for a long time, people thought, oh, the non-admitted marketplace, but they're the ones that are actually the only ones that are writing. So if elected, bringing in these markets that can help to get people off the fair plan and make the marketplace more competitive. What are your plans there in making it a more, I love the word harmonious, and I'm going to use it here. How are you setting yourself to create a more harmonious marketplace?
So you're right. This is exactly the problem we've run into. I think the first thing I want to say is I think we have to be honest about the problem. We can't simply bring insurers, demand that insurers come back into the market by pretending that risk hasn't changed. We also can't simply just keep approving rate increases willy-nilly and hope that the market fixes itself. So my goal here, and of course, you're right to frame it this way, there's the admitted market, the non-admitted, the fair plan. My goal here is to try to move as much coverage as possible back into the admitted market, of course, where consumers have stronger protections, clearer oversight. Surplus lines have a role for, at least they're supposed to be about unusual or hard to place risks, but they're not supposed to be the default option for ordinary homeowners or landlords or small rental property owners. And yet we know, unfortunately, they've become more of a place to go. Properties that never, ever would have normally been on the surplus lines market. So
on that though, I just want to jump in here real quick. The non-admitted market is, I'm in Eastern Ventura County, right at the LA County, Ventura County border. We've been completely categorized as a high fire zone across the board. So when you talk about the admitted markets, and we'll bring this up later, it's all speed to market. Everything that we try and do is the speed to market. Unfortunately, and I literally had a meeting with some carriers this last week and 2 weeks ago, and their issue is they need to make a rate change. They want to give a credit for hardening their home or whatever it is. It costs millions of dollars to do the filing, and then it takes a year. It's supposed to happen in 60 days.
Oh, totally.
But it takes a year. So, and I'll use it because you're in politics, and I was on the city council as well. But when you guys want to pass a bill, what do you guys have to do? It takes tons of money, and then you start putting a bunch of different things on that bill, because you have to make it valuable enough to make it through that process. And so that's what the insurers have to do. So when you talk about the admitted carriers, the Mercury, the Travelers, the Safeco, the Liberty, to make the filing for them to make it cost effective, they end up having to wait a year or 2 years.
It's crazy. We are way out of whack. We are way out of whack on that. The Prop 103 itself says that we're supposed to be getting these things properly reviewed and finished up within 50 to 60 days. Next slowest state beyond us is New York, which I think is half a year. Most states are 30 to 60 days. We are so out of whack on that. So there's no question. That is a major cost driver. It creates a lot of uncertainty and unpredictability. It's really harming the admitted market and making the admitted market less competitive. So I totally agree. that that's got to be one major area of work. We've got to also enforce the bargain behind the sustainable insurance strategy and make sure that they're delivering more availability in high-risk communities. Yes, we got to modernize rate review, faster, more predictable review. We got not just rubber. It's not about rubber stamping. It's not about either approving or denying. It's just about creating more speed so that we can have a better, more efficient system. And that's going to, of course, involve better resource department, stronger technical capacity, a real scrutiny of filings. I also think making mitigation count is an important part of this story. If homeowners and landlords and HOAs, fire districts, local governments, if they reduce risk through home hardening and defensible space and community mitigation, and again, I recognize that if an individual reduces risk, it still doesn't necessarily help if the rest of the community hasn't. But if we really engage in trying to scale this risk reduction work, that should be rewarded and reflected in underwriting and rates.
But when I talk to the carriers, that they agree on that, and I like Samantha, we all know that we talk about risk reduction, but the problem is they can't get the incentive to the insured to do it. And for the last 30 years, California didn't have a wildfire. We had forest management before, which we didn't have the fuel that's out there. We had a lot of things we changed, and those things changed over the last 25, 30 years, which has now caused these issues. And when you get into these issues we're dealing with in the fire, if the carrier can't give the discount to get the client to do it, the client's not going to do it. But then the client has been using, the homeowners and stuff have been using for years now, the home insurance as a maintenance program. They're not fixing
Yep.
their roof. They're not changing their windows. They're not maintaining their trees. Things happen. And then,
Yep.
then it's the insurance company's fault because they didn't insure her. Well, we got to have some give and take there. So everybody's got to take a responsibility from the
100%.
government down to the consumer all along the way. And who's in the middle holding the bag on this one? Samantha and I, because we're the intermediary between the carrier
And the insurance
and the client.
commissioner.
Well, and people don't realize, and you mentioned it earlier, the insurance commissioner is probably almost as powerful in California as the governor. And unless the governor and the insurance commissioner want to work together, that's where we run into a lot of problems.
Totally.
Unfortunately, most governors look at the insurance commissioners. That's a step towards being the governor, and that's who's going to try and come after my job. And it's happened since we went to the election of having an insurance commissioner elected.
No, I will say it's a terrible stepping stone. In the history of this position,
Absolutely.
only one other insurance commissioner in history, elected insurance commissioner, has ever gone on to any other elected office. So anybody who sees this as some stepping stone, I laugh sometimes because a couple of the non-elected officials in the race keep saying, I'm not using this as a stepping stone. I think anyone with half a brain can't really think of this as a stepping stone.
But they do.
It's a fixing stone is the way that we're looking at it.
100%.
Brings me to my next segue. And Daniel, let's dig into our lovely topic of Prop 103.
So, Ben, I hope that you understand what Prop 103 is, and you mentioned it, so I imagine you do. A lot of people don't. We talk to people all the time, and I was just speaking at a group of 60 agents for real estate, and I said, how many know Prop 103 is? And nobody raised their hand.
Oh my
so
God.
Proposition 103 was passed in 1988, a long time ago in the framework of today's world. It established the basic framework to how insurance is regulated in California, prior approval rate review, the intervener process, the specific rules about what insurers can and cannot consider in pricing. Nearly 4 decades later, which elements of the framework do you believe still help California consumers, and which do you believe updating may reflect the realities of what the current market is?
Great question. Look, I think that Prop 103 has done a lot of good. It remains one of the most important consumer protection laws in our state. I think that the core principle is still sound. Insurance companies shouldn't be able to just raise rates without any public review or justification or accountability. The parts that still serve consumers well, I think we can look at prior approval, transparency, the ability for consumers to have a voice in the process. I think those are protections that matter and have value. I think that they're why California's historically had some stronger oversight than many other states, and why the commissioners got real authority to question rate increases rather than just simply rubber stamping them. Look, I think that I also sensed in your question, you have to be honest that the market has changed dramatically since 1988. This thing was written in 1988. There was a different time. Climate risk is so different. Reinsurance costs are different. Catastrophe modeling is much more central to how companies evaluate risk. Consumers are not helped if the rate review process is so slow or outdated that insurers pull back from the market and stop writing policies and force people onto the FAIR Plan. So my view is not that we should fundamentally weaken Proposition 103. I think that would be a mistake, but I do think we need to preserve its core consumer protections while modernizing the process so that it works in today's market, allowing for more forward-looking modeling and making it more efficient, that in a way that's going to be more tied to the realities on the ground of today's world.
So you mentioned reinsurance, and that's going to be part of the next question here. So another question I'll get you later, but how do you feel about reinsurance being categorized into an expense for the insurance company when they're filing for the rates? Let's throw it out right now.
I think within reason, as long as we don't allow this to become some massive unexamined loophole, also involves self-dealing. I think it's obviously an important part of the story. Reinsurance is spooked. The global reinsurance market is spooked by their perception of risk in California right now. And it is definitely becoming a cost driver. By the way, a couple of the candidates, myself included, have been talking about, is there a space for the state to intercede very tactically and incisively in the reinsurance space so as to smooth over some of the market rigidities that are currently impacting reinsurance availability and driving up costs for people. But as long as it's done very carefully, I think it's not inappropriate to have reinsurance costs and just the realities of the reinsurance market brought into the rate review process.
It's a part of expense of doing business. It's 100%. One of the biggest parts of them doing business is the reinsurance. So under Prop 103's intervener provisions, outside parties, mostly predominant consumer watchdog, can participate in the rate proceedings and recover fees that participation, with consumer watchdog alone having been awarded over $18 million in intervener fees since 2003. Supporters argue this creates a consumer check on insurer rate filings, but critics argue that it slows the rate review, increases litigation costs that are passed on to the policyholders, and function as a subsidy to a small number of participating groups. What's your view on the intervener process as it currently operates, and how would you seek to change it and to make it function and how the fees are awarded?
From my perspective, the intervener process, its only value, and by the way, I'm not trying to discount, I'm not trying to say this doesn't have value, but its only value is to the extent that it really helps to better inform the process so as to ensure that consumers' needs and concerns are being incorporated.
But couldn't the commissioner's office do that themselves? Do they really
Yeah,
need
so
a third party out there going, hey, I want $1 million to review this and hold up the process?
that's a great question. That's a great question. I have spoken to really smart people who have very different perspectives on this, and I'm trying to get my head around this because I asked that question myself. Now, what some of the folks will tell you is that there's all sorts of benefits associated with that third independent eye. We have an intervener process, the PUC as well, on the utility rates process, and I've seen the benefits of that. I think, quite
But
frankly,
it's not one group that majorly does it. It's not Consumer Watchdog. So when you do the PUC one, it's a difference that I would see if you're going to use an intervener to verify this makes sense. Go to Deloitte, go to Ernst & Young, go to KPMG, go to these huge accounting firms that can really do it, and they're neutral and they're going to have realistic costs. They're not doing it for their own financial benefit.
I think the truth is that this is always so tricky, right? And this is the same thing with the Private Attorney General Act. We want to compensate people and create some incentive for people to bring forward and do work associated with making the system work better. But the flip side is, does it become a cottage industry that ends up not actually providing a lot of benefit to consumers and creating a new revenue for an organization? For me, it's always going to come down to what's the value add for consumers. And I would, and I know that there's a massive interrogation of that very question right now going on with the insurance commissioner coming out with his proposals, and so as to really reform the intervener process. And I don't think it's inappropriate for us to be asking those kinds of questions. From my perspective, I guess I'm not ready to just throw the whole system out the window, because I would want to make sure that, to the extent that it is informing the process to the benefit of consumers, I want to preserve some of those protections. But I agree with your core complaint, which is to the extent that it's about we shouldn't be subsidizing a cottage industry that doesn't actually benefit consumers.
Well, and it's actually harming the industry overall when it gets abused. And I think that's the real thing that we're looking at out here.
That's taken from the 60 days that we're supposed to do it in to the 300 plus days.
Right. And so that's a great example. So to the extent it's unnecessarily delaying the process, driving up costs, that's not working. We can't accept that.
A great example of that is our own California Fair Plan. So 3.5 years ago, the California Fair Plan did an audit and said, we need 70% rate increase to stay sustainable. This is prior to the last group of fires we had. We need 70%. They applied for 50%. It went to the intervener, it went through the process. They got 15%. And then we all know what happened. Then the Eaton Fire, Palisades Fire, Malibu Fire came through and caused enormous damage. And then what happened? California Fair Plan didn't have enough reinsurance, didn't have enough money to do it. And so then they had to go tap out into the preferred markets, the Mercury, the Travelers, the Safeco, and had them. One company, CSE Insurance, had been out of business for 2 years, and they still got hit with a $5 million bill to the California Fair Plan because there were still some lingering policies. So that's where I think the problem lies is if a carrier says, I need this to survive, now we've just proved that it didn't work with the intervener. They said they didn't need it. They did. And now we all know what happened.
On the macro, obviously, the focus has to be on pursuing a set of policies and practices that are going to reduce risk, create more competition, drive down these kinds of massive cost drivers, and again, depopulate the fair plan and get people back into the main system because it's actually healthy and running functionally. So from my perspective, again, the lens by which I'm going to look at this is it actually making a difference for the market and for consumers. And if it's not, I'm not interested in just subsidizing organizations' work that isn't actually benefiting consumers. So
and I think that's the mic drop moment, because that's just like, duh. It makes complete sense.
And Samantha and I have talked about it, and and I know a lot of agents, we've all volunteered to help the insurance commissioner understand how insurance really works. Unfortunately, we've had insurance commissioners that did not know a thing about insurance, and they're trying to learn on the job. That'd be like me getting a pilot stepping into my plane saying, hey, I got a YouTube video and a manual. We're going to be just fine. It doesn't work. We're dealing with people's lives, their livelihoods, their biggest financial assets are their homes and their stuff that they have in the state of California.
I think that we've got to, the rate review process has to be modernized. We've got to push for clear filing timelines and early issue spotting, more transparent process so that companies can know what information is required, so that consumers can know what's being reviewed. It's interesting because this concern about the delays and how the intervener process plays into them has been raised for a long time. And I know Ricardo's been trying to work on it. And I know he's struggled to come up with a plan to really change things. I think he says that they're bringing down the time and they're making some progress. But obviously, I would want to spend some time looking at prioritizing staffing and technical capacity inside the department,
Modernizing the system.
right, especially around catastrophe modeling, reinsurance, actuarial review, wildfire risk, all those kinds of things. And then I would also think that we need to triage really routine filings or well-supported filings to just move on quickly.
Well,
Complex.
when we look at when the parts supply issue happened during COVID, all rate increases were froze for 2 years. At the point where the highest increase in labor, parts supply, and vehicles was going on, and the carriers were getting beat up on it. The severity of claims were getting worse. So on that, I'm going to just segue over. So Prop 103 can be amended by the legislature only if the amendment furthers the purpose of the initiative, a standard that has been interpreted narrowly by the courts that makes meaningful statutory reform difficult without going back to the voters. As the insurance commissioner, would you support a legislative or a ballot effort to modernize specific provisions of Prop 103? And if so, which provisions would you want as your priority? And I think we hit on that. It's the rate filing, it's speed to market. Those are the things and you mentioned it a couple times. The more carriers we get into the place, the better it's going to be. It's more competitive. It's like anything else. 100%. If I go to a car dealership to buy a car and they have 500 cars there, I'm going to get a better deal on a car than if I go to a dealer that has 10 cars.
Now, I know at least one of the other people you interviewed doesn't agree with that principle, but yes. Makes sense to me.
So what would be your priority one? Would it be using legislator or voter? And where would you try and do it?
I think that the challenge of going to the voters is it's incredibly expensive. It's unpredictable. Every time you try to make it, there was a woman who tried to come up with some reforms, I think from the agent community, and was quickly met with a counter proposal from Consumer Watchdog that pulled really well. And I think quickly realized it was not a really smart path for her to take. So one of the benefits of having someone like me in this position is that you've got a really deep set of experience getting difficult legislation through the legislature. This is, and I have to say, with so much respect for a couple of other candidates who are really smart people, they totally discount the political and legislative component to this work. I don't think they're just not attuned that way. So you recognize this through this question you just asked. And at the end of the day, I think that going through the legislature is far easier. You can amend. It's much less expensive. You can make changes. It's more predictable. It really provides an opportunity for a more nuanced policy discussion. Of course, it's hard, and legislators don't like taking on tough issues, and they will be nervous about being vilified for not being pro-consumer if they take too big a swipe at Proposition 103. So we'd have to frame this really carefully in a way that really grounded in the consumer protections of Proposition 103. But ultimately, that's all of us should want. For me, it's about making sure that the system is actually working for consumers. To the extent that it's going to help the industry, that all I care about on that side is if it's going to have a healthy industry that can then provide real benefits and affordable insurance to people. That's my interest.
So let's take this to the streets, Ben, because we're boots on the ground out here, Daniel and I. And every single day, I tell you, the conversations that we have with insureds, they're not great, right? The people are pissed. The California consumer that's buying
people hate insurance industry.
They hate it. And
I'll be honest, they like us more now than they like the insurance commissioner and the governor. I have to say, it's pitchforks.
People are mad in general.
They're mad.
They're unhappy.
Well, you look at homeowners policy, and I grew up at Thousand Oaks, and I have a lot of business out there. I currently live up in Marin County, and so I am very voiced and aware of premiums and things. And you get somebody that's got $1 million dwelling value, and they're paying $852 a year for insurance. It's just like, okay, those days are gone, guys. But that's the mindset of the consumer because of all of this stuff that's been going on for years. And as far as the commissioner's office goes, the insurance carrier market goes, the agents, if elected, what's your thoughts on bringing us all together and making it so we're one body of yes, we're the good people out there instead of this, everybody's pointing fingers at each other all the time. And at the end of the day, like we're the ones trying to sell the products and have these not so great conversations all the time.
Well, obviously, it's incredibly hard. The circumstances are difficult. People are feeling squeezed. People are angry. They're mad at everybody. They're mad at you. They're mad at politicians. They're mad at everybody. There's a perception that life in California is just getting so much more expensive. Quality of life is starting to diminish, and they're seeing all these factors and forces that are playing in a way that aren't going to be helping them. And so now, look, my MO has always been to push for positive changes for the public without vilifying the players. And I bring up this plastics bill that I worked on. I got this landmark bill. We've got international coverage to finally hold the plastics producers accountable for the end use of their products, because there's a lot of the costs associated with all this plastic waste that's being pushed out into the market is being borne by ratepayers. It's all being built into our taxes and our rates that we pay for our waste hauling system, because as they try to band-aid over a massively overburdened system with all this new waste that's being pushed out, while the industry that keeps pushing it out, making money off of it, aren't paying any of the costs of the externalized costs. So we ended up getting a ballot measure to qualify that started a whole negotiation. We ended up getting a major bill through that I led. But for me, it was about just listening carefully. I was never trying to vilify people. I was never looking at anyone as the enemy. It was all about trying to focus on a really good public policy solution that was going to create greater coherence to the system, which could then drive down rates, give the people that actually had the most control over these products and who understood their markets and understood their customers the most, the ability to lead the way toward helping us come up with broader solutions, but holding them accountable to real guideposts and real accountability measures. And that's going to be the same ethos that I'm going to bring to this. I'm coming in very independent of the industry, for sure. But I'm not coming into this as an enemy of the industry. I've taken on the industry. I've pushed back on them. I try to negotiate. I fight. I push. I cajole every tool that I have. But I'm not the person that is always looking to vilify and look. My personal approach to political negotiations is actually along the lines of what you just described to me. That trying to bring people together, listen incredibly carefully, focus on keeping the eyes on the prize. It's not about trying to punish people. It's about trying to fix the system in a way that's actually going to benefit the state and our ability to grow, and really listening intensely to stakeholders. And that's been my MO ever since I started in the legislature. And again, it's part of what motivates me to run for this really godforsaken position, because in the end of the day, this job, the biggest job here is not the rate review process. I'm going to focus on trying to speed that up. And there's lots of things that are within the four corners of Proposition 103 that we've been discussing that are absolutely things that need to be prioritized by the commissioner. But the real work that's going to heal the market writ large over a longer period of time is going to involve major political negotiations involving all these stakeholders to push for a change in process and culture in the state that will be embedded in law and practice, that will reduce risk in communities in return for affordable insurance. And I was just literally, my last call was with Napa Firewise, and we were talking about how we can scale the fire risk reduction work that they're engaging in around the state, but do so in a way that meets the actuarial needs of the insurance industry, so as to lead to affordable insurance.
I love it.
That's the problem on some of that you're saying, though, is it's got to go back through changing and updating Prop 103. I'm not saying get rid of it, but remember who wrote Prop 103 was Consumer Watchdog, and they wrote themselves in as the person who reviews these rate changes. So anytime somebody wants to modify it, they're the ones that are blocking what gets done, because it's going to affect their revenue. You look at $18 million in the last 23 years they've been paid. It makes sense for them to try and stop the changes that will be done to Prop 103, because they're the main beneficiary.
Look, so as you may know, and you may have interviewed her, there was a I think it was a broker, an agent, who put forward a proposal last summer to dramatically rescind or reform Prop 103, and she ultimately pulled back because there was a countermeasure that they put forward that was incredibly popular that would have made things worse from your perspective, right? So look, you got to work within this political reality. It's all about trying to have somebody with a level head in this position who's able to navigate tricky political situations. And I think anybody who is going to, I don't disagree. This is not going to be a really
Won't be a walk in the park.
It's not going to be a walk in the park. But that's why, again, that's why you want somebody who has helped to lead really tricky, meaty legislative negotiations. And to
Makes sense.
discount that political skill set as being relevant in this race is a massive mistake. And of course, it's being articulated by some of the other candidates who don't have any of that experience. So I understand why they'd be discounting it. But
My opinion, and I think Samantha falls in this as well, is I think an insurance commissioner, the best thing they can do is bring, like Samantha said, bring stakeholders from the insurance agency community, bring stakeholders from the insurance carrier community, and bring stakeholders from the end user into some forum or a group that can really hash out and to help whoever gets elected to insurance commissioner, whether
It's
it's you or
critical, and I
anybody
think
else.
it's an ecosystem that must all
We
work
all got to
together.
work harmoniously together, and if we don't, that's where the problem is. It's right now it's them against us.
well, and
And
then let me add to that list. You got to bring in local government. You got to bring in fire experts,
absolutely.
the utilities. So
And then
there's
you
a
got to
big
get tort reform because
yeah. There's a
Samantha and I said this in every one of our conversations. Samantha and I were on the phone going through the logistics on how we're going to do this. I was on the 5 freeway in Commerce in dead stop traffic. And I go, Samantha, you're not going to believe this. I can count 9 that I can
right.
see with my glasses
Billboards.
off, billboards that we
James, we
got
see
this,
you.
we got this, we got this, we got this. And the problem we have is that's not what the consumer ends up getting because now they brought into hedge fund companies, which I think should be totally illegal, that are financing these lawsuits that can drag this out forever and cause it. We all pay when that
Yeah.
happens.
Well, I have actually taken a lot of personal heat from certain trial lawyers for calling into question their business model with regards to public liabilities. And so I look, I if you I would I, this is bringing up some suggestions for future podcasts. I think you should do a whole thing on SB 254, which is the Earthquake Authority report that came out that's looking at all the who's going to have to take a haircut in all of this, including potentially lawyers. There's also a really, I think you should also host a debate or something about the upcoming ballot propositions with regards where you have the trial lawyers going up against Uber, because you're going to see a lot of these arguments playing out on a grand stage in the November election. And there are massive insurance implications to those two
All
ballot
those.
measures that are headed. So I highly encourage you to do a deep dive into both of those
We
topics. They're
will.
going to be on front and center in the policy conversation this year,
Well, I
not
think
just for the legislature but also for voters.
bringing it back to claims, and one of the words I like that you used was this accountability word. When there is a claim or a cat mass loss, like we've seen, we've done the Napa experience, we've just seen the Palisades and Eaton and Altadena, all these different fires and horrible things that are happening. When we sell insurance, the consumer pays the premium, and then there's a promise to pay from the carrier. And as agents, it's our time to really shine. And I remember getting a call from a client in Altadena whose house was burning down. And he's like, what do I do? What's the next steps? And this is our time as professionals in our space to shine. And what we find a lot, and you just saw our State Farm was in the news just, I think, last week, getting some heat about these carriers not holding up their end of the bargain in a timely fashion and paying claims and all these different issues. So if elected, what's your stance on carrier claim payouts and these stallings and these things? You're in Santa Monica. You're in the thick of it, man. What's your thoughts here?
Well, it's really frustrating, and especially when you see how much it's become a part of the business model of some of these companies. Some of these companies behaved incredibly honorably. They paid out very quickly. I represent the Palisades, so I got a chance to see all this up close. And my office, again, was just helping hundreds of people get the payouts that they deserved. But it was very hard, and still there's hundreds more that we've not been able to help yet. I'm actually working on a bill right now with Senator Sasha Perez to penalize unnecessary delays in payouts.
State Farm.
Because from my perspective, it's grotesque, it's unfair. It's also, of course, destroying faith in the system. I think as more people read about these kinds of cases, they think, why the hell would I want to have robust insurance if I don't have any confidence that it's going to be there for me when I actually need it? And so we're actually working on a bill right now on this very topic.
It's funny
I love it.
because you mentioned that, and I reached out to all of my carriers. I'm like, what's your average time of payout? How long before you met the client? And the ones that I thought were really interesting, because you mentioned earlier, was I had several non-admitted carriers, and I talked to one about it. I'm like, he goes, we had 4 claims. He goes, we wrote a check within a week and a half for full policy limit. He goes, we wanted to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do. And of course, then I hear these other horror stories on some of the, and I hate to mention State Farm again, but the runaround that some of these clients were going through, And then I've
Yep.
talked to people that have called me and said, how do you, I know you don't represent it, but how can you help me? And then I'm like, you need to call the insurance commission. You need to do this thing because
And that's why what the commissioner did was so important with just laying it all out in black and white. I was hearing about these problems literally just a couple months, even weeks into post fire. And so Sasha and I called for this investigation. Finally, it's now all out in black and white. But this is freeloading off of the rest of the system, right? There's actually a lot of honest, good actors in the insurance system that are getting a bad, but the whole industry is painted with a bad brush because of the bad behavior of some of these folks. It's one of the reasons why I'm working with the current commissioner right now on a bill to increase some of the enforcement powers to go after this behavior. Some of these
Well, and
bad
from a
actors.
sales seat, when I'm looking at carrier A, B, or C and prices are this, that, and everything else, I will say to the client, listen, like I've had some not great claims experience. So maybe their premiums are less, but their service sucks. And so maybe
Yeah.
that's not. So as agents, we're starting to steer away because we're not interested in selling a product that's not going to deliver when it's time to deliver.
we want to be able to
Yeah.
walk, we want to be
I
able to
will
walk
say
through the
one of
grocery
the
store and say to a client, say, how is everything? And they're going to tell me, great, you took care of me. I appreciate you. And I've told my family about you. That's how we live is basically,
totally
active. We don't want to be
right.
hiding behind a kiosk in a mall because somebody's coming,
Right.
their claim didn't get paid.
Right. Well, with that in mind, I'm absolutely, I listen very carefully to my opponents. One of the best ideas I've heard articulated on the campaign trail that I would absolutely adopt is Patrick Wolf's idea associated with a report card. So is to give people more information about post-disaster behavior by these companies. Consumer Federation has it for on the national level, but it doesn't exist at the state level. And I think it's just important for people to have more transparency about how these companies behave, and so they can differentiate. You guys are sophisticated players, but for the average person, these are just a whole. They don't know any difference between these products. It's the one product you hope to never use. So people have
Right.
so little information. All they know is the jingles and the gag ads that the companies keep pushing out. I can't think of a more vacuous set of advertising of any industry in our country than in insurance, right? Geckos and geese and emus and jingles. And it's all about boosting name ID and there's no substance associated with these ads. And it's an eye-opening thing for you to think about. Even the car ads are, at least you get to see the interior and you feel cool driving around in the woods. These insurance ads are just there's so little substance to them. And it helps me understand. I think it's illustrative of the fact that for the vast majority of the public, they just know they need to get some insurance, and there's no difference between them from company to company.
They
And yet we
think,
know there is a massive difference. We know there's differential treatment. And I think one of the jobs of the commissioner is to actually hold the lousy ones accountable, boost up the ones that are doing a good job, because they ought to be rewarded in the market, the ones that actually behave right.
I
Yeah.
get the question. I know Samantha probably gets to it. I get somebody else send me an email. Hey, who's got the cheapest good insurance? I'm like, well, those are two different things. Do you want cheap insurance or do you want good insurance? You're not you're gonna get the guy we've all seen it, $19 a month for auto insurance. I wouldn't
Yeah.
want to insure my bicycle at something like that because I know I'll never get it compensated.
Right.
Am I just keeping my insurance to keep it legal so I don't have to get but
Right. And look, and by the way, if that's your goal, then what? Fine. But I want there to be what the screwed up thing about the situation is if people don't understand that there's actually quite a bit, there's so little transparency, I think, for a lot of these products. And we've seen this in a grotesque form with regards to smoke damage. If people want to write away their smoke damage coverage, it should be their right, but I'd like that to be done on the front end, as opposed to the current situation where people thought they were fully covered and now they're not getting basic payouts
hey,
when they're home.
I've cooked in my house before. I think I got smoke damage from the cooking, not from any fires.
But I think too, a lot of the policies, what you're finding with the way that these nuclear claims are and the way the policies are written. When I started in insurance 25 years ago, when I was 2 years old, guys, you were finding your policy conditions were thicker than your exclusions. And now it's the other way around. There's more things not covered. And it's our job as agents to be able to articulate that to people and have them sign off on you're not getting habitability coverage and there's no smoke and there's all these different things, because people, at the end of the day, like most consumers, they just want to sign away, pay the money, and satisfy whatever
And pay the
requirement.
least amount.
Right.
And that's
And we talked about it with everybody else too, is there's a lot of predatory insurance agencies out there that they're feeing it for everything. Oh, I'm going to give you $19 a month auto insurance, but you want an ID card? That's an extra $25. You want to make a payment? It's extra. Those are the things we really need to start protecting consumers on as well. That's a huge problem in the marketplace. And it's usually ethnically based too. And that's the bad thing. It's doing it in areas that really aren't reading the policies and they're taking advice because they speak their language and they don't want to step into a situation where They don't want to call the big carrier or something.
Oh, so you're saying that we've seen this a lot where people, especially in language minority communities, where folks are just not familiar with this area
They're
of
being taken
industry.
advantage of.
They're taking advantage of them. And I'll be honest, it makes me sick when people come in with their policies and then they tell me, oh, they'll come in to they've moved to us now and they've been with this other XYZ agency and they come in, they're like, oh, I need to make a payment. And then it's $100. They go, here's $125. I'm like, no, it's $100. And they're like, well, I don't have to pay to make a payment here.
In Daniel's
No,
next life, he is going to be an investigator with the Department.
absolutely. When I retire, that's what I want to do. I want to be an
Hey
investigator
man,
and shut
no,
people
listen,
down.
come on, come work with me, man. Let's do it.
So Ben,
Seriously.
we have asked everybody as our closing question, what is your legacy to be if elected? What are the top 3 big levers you're going to be pulling saying, I did this?
Yeah.
What is that going to be for you?
Well, I want to make the system work better, right? So for me, it's about making sure we bolster our fraud division, our customer service operation, the speed of the rate review. So I want to have the system work better for writ large, all these kinds of issues we've been talking about. Obviously, my dream that is exciting for me after going through these terrible fires is to help put in place a change in practice in our state, the way we build our communities, the way we harden our communities, the community resiliency that will make this type of conflagration that we just experienced in LA and previous in Napa and Santa Rosa and Paradise and elsewhere much less likely. There are ways that we can reduce risk and actually want to capitalize on this crisis in the insurance market and all the value associated with risk reduction to the utilities, to the insurance industry, to the public to change our culture and our approach. And I think it's very doable. You see this around the state. You start to see examples of Escondido, for example. I went to visit a community where they've built right into the very high fire zone, and the entire community, this particular community, is subjected to a very high set of risk reduction standards in the way they built the homes, the way they do their vegetation management, the way they invest in their firefighting infrastructure, both in the wildlands and also in the neighborhood. And as a result, this neighborhood is spending thousands of dollars less per unit on insurance than the neighborhood right next door, because the insurer feels so confident that they're actually taking their risk seriously. I want to see if we can scale.
That's what makes sense. And we talked about this with a few others is we can't stop the power lines from arcing. I can't stop lightning from hitting the hills. I can't stop those things, but we can mitigate the fuel. If you take the fuel away, back in the 30, 40 years ago, we did forest management. They did back burns. They cleaned out areas. They would let the fire burn until it got closer to the city and they'd put it out. And then we stopped that. Now it's as soon as you've got a fire breaks out, you put it out. Well, then the problem is that fuel continues to grow. Southern California and most of the state is a desert. Hot, we get the winds. You got to make sure the fuel is contained. And that's the issue.
And the good news is there's actually a lot of technology that is starting to provide some new answers. I was at the rollout of this company that does much more nature-friendly controlled burns. For example, BurnBot, which I encourage you to, if you haven't talked to them, they're a really interesting group to get on your podcast. There's all sorts of firefighting technology from water.
Yeah, Komodo, have you heard of Komodo yet?
Komodo, yeah.
I've introduced that to some of the carriers because I'm like, this is game changer.
Yeah, totally.
It's food grade, biodegradable. It just puts a wall up. You spray your house in the beginning of the season and it lasts all the way through the next year. And you can't even light it on fire with a torch.
And the question is, how can we create a system which will actually scale the implementation of these kinds of practices?
Let me tell you, give it to where the carrier can give enough of a discount for the consumer to use it. That's where it is. So you mentioned building homeowners, like the water shutoff systems. More houses are going to have water damage from a leaky slab leak, a faucet angle stop breaking or something like that than anything else. When I talk to the carriers about it, they're like, yes, we know it's a 75% more chance of that happening of a fire. We can't get a discount approved fast enough for that type of a system. There's Mow and Flow, there's Fin, there's all of these other ones because they have to do a rate filing to do it. And they're like, I'm not going to do a rate filing for one thing because it takes a year to do it. Where I go to the non-standard market and I go, hey, LyteSpeed Insurance, I got this program. We'll have that enforced in 2 weeks. We can give a $200 discount or whatever the discount is. It makes the consumer do it. So if we can make that speed happen is where it's at.
How counterproductive that we have to go through a rate. The system that's supposedly supposed to help consumers that we have to then go through rate filing just to get you less, to pay less money. It's crazy. So those are the kinds of things that I absolutely think need to be changed and reformed. And for me, it's about just being commonsensical, having a system.
Common sense. That's an amazing thing right there.
It's a big word and it's a good closing word because I feel like our industry needs a lot of it. We can't say thanks enough, Ben, for your time today. Just learning a lot about you, what you're standing for, the work that you're doing out there on the streets in your seat currently. Thank you. Elections, primaries, June 2nd. That's next
Tuesday.
Tuesday. So if you have not gotten your mail in ballot yet, you're going to go hit the streets and go vote in person. We hope that you listen to our incredible conversations we've been able to have in a non-political, non-endorsing format. We're here just to bring you the information, and we do hope that we've kept you all up to speed.